Welcome today to OffStage podcast. My name is Brittany Kuklinski.
My name is Zanelle Alvarez. Let's get into it.
Today, we are going to be talking about destiny decisions. And what does that mean to you, Zanelle? When you think about destiny decisions, what do you think about?
I think destiny decisions are decisions that shift your entire life. And I know that when you think about, I know for me, I'm in my decade of decisions.
There you go.
You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this 10 years of my life, I'm making the most important decisions. And so to me, it means the decisions that are going to make and shape my life.
Yeah, for sure. And why don't we talk about when we first made the best decision of our lives is to serve God. Mm-hmm. Why don't you take us there and tell those that are watching what the biggest decision you made is and how you came to that decision?
I think obviously my biggest decision of my life was to serve God. And I know for me, I grew up in the things of God. I grew up in the house of God. And I love to say that I always heard of the Jesus that people talked about. I knew who Jesus was. I knew who God was, but I needed to discover him for myself.
Right.
And I think that when I had that encounter at that altar call, for me, it was at a winter retreat in Hume Lake. And I remember God just specifically showing me a vision of what my life could be serving him or what my life could be not serving him.
Yeah.
And I made that decision that shaped my life and continues to be a reference point for my future. When it comes to all the decisions I've made from that point on, there hasn't been a moment that I haven't looked back on that first decision that I made.
Right. And it lines up somehow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think for myself, I know I was 21, almost 22. I grew up in the ministry my whole entire life. But I was 21, 22, and I was at the Milton Church at Whittier. Whoop, whoop. And I remember it was a Friday night prayer. And those, if you guys ever checked out Friday night prayer at Whittier, they're just life-altering, obviously, because I made the best decision of my life. And I remember I was weeping and crying, and the same thing that happened, God started giving me a vision for my life. And I remember I got up, and I sat up to my seat, and I was like, I got to make some decisions. I remember started just cutting things out of my life, and that I've never looked back. And I'm 32, so I'm like on 10 years of making the best decision of my life. And I love that. And I know other decisions have come up, right? What do you think about the decisions that you've made in your life? What comes to mind of those life-altering decisions that have impacted you now today?
For me, I mean, right when I got saved, just to give a little backstory, I hit some major trials in my life. I was very young when I got saved, but I also experienced some heavy things right away. I mean, literally a year after I got saved, my brother passed away. Then a year later, my sister got diagnosed with leukemia. So I was in these battles, and I feel like the enemy was after my faith, after my salvation, after my purpose, because I was tested. And I remember God even just showing me like the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, like, even if you don't, will you serve me? I had to believe for these big miracles. And God began to give me that fortified faith where it's like, you're going to face some hard things, but are you going to stand on that decision?
That's so good.
And that was shaped inside of me. And I think from that moment on, I made the decisions to not continue to make decisions in the dark.
That's good.
For me, it was like, I'm not going to make a life-altering decision in a dark place. I'm going to seek God. I'm going to separate. I'm going to find that word from God in his word, a promise from him that is confirmed about my destiny, because I've never wanted to make a decision without considering that first decision, that first vision, that first thing God spoke to me.
Yeah, and what about expounding on the fact that a lot of people feel this way, and I could relate to it as well, is when you start serving God and saying yes to his will, then everything around us kind of gets hit.
Oh, yeah.
And some people are like, if God is so good, why do my family face sickness? Why does this happen? And have you ever had to share with somebody about that? What do you usually tell them?
Right? The Bible talks about like his ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. And I'm always reminded that even when we face those challenging moments that test our faith, that it's true. Like, you could be, to me, I'm like, why does bad things happen to good people? Like,
Yeah.
Like, it's not fair. Like, they're serving God, they're faithful, they're consistent, but they're getting hit. And sometimes we don't realize that our mind is not like God's mind. You know, his ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. And we have to know that we serve a sovereign God. And I learned that very quickly. And I remember God speaking to me. It was at the hospital. We had a chapel there. And actually, my mom, she went there to pray. She brought me along, and we were seeking God. And I remember asking God, why God, why God? And I was in tears, crying, why? I didn't understand. But God spoke to me very clearly. And he spoke to me, you don't have to understand why. Your job is not to understand why. Your job is to obey and trust. And I think as believers, that's what our assignment is to have faith.
Right.
And what is, it's not true faith when life is perfect.
Right.
The true faith is when you're in the fire,
right.
but you continue to stand on that fortified faith.
Right, yeah. And I really agree with that too, because I think that when I grew up, again, like I said, I grew up in the church, and if Sunday church was a non-negotiable. But I remember a season of my life, most pivotal years of my life was in high school. And my family, of what I've known, became broken. So I could say I came from a season and a moment of time where my family was broken. I felt like I was in the midst of it. And I thought, man, God, like, we've always said yes. We've always went to church. We've always been surrounded by it. And this is what a Christian household look like. And I remember that put a big damper on my relationship with Christ. But I remember so, like, pivotally, I was going, how crazy how winter retreat's so impactful. Because I'm thinking now, I'm like, I was raising for finances in winter. I think I was 16 or 17. I wanted to go, and my parents probably could just have paid for it, but they were like, you want to go, raise your money, so I'm like, okay. And in that, if you guys know, back in 2007, 2009, there was like a big like recession that was happening, and so everyone was losing their jobs left and right. And so I remember in that moment, because my family was falling apart, what I knew what a Christ-like household looked like was no longer there. And I remember just feeling all these emotions. I wanted to go to winter retreat. And I remember saving for finances and getting to a place where I went to, if you guys probably knew about it if you live in California, but Norm's Restaurant, it's a 24-hour restaurant. And they're like, oh, we can't donate, but we can give you a job. Keep in mind, everyone was losing a job at this time. And God opened up a door for me to get a job. And I remember just seeing, like, just his goodness even in that. Like, he started opening up doors for myself to step through. I went to winter retreat. I felt like God began to speak to me, show me. People started praying over me, saying that there's more inside of me that needs to come out, because I felt like I really hid behind my parents. And that's just my personality. And I feel like in talking about decisions, I had to make decisions to get out of the shadow and like step out and become my own person. But I remember that those are destiny decisions. I made a decision like I'm getting to that mountaintop, and like you made the decision to pray and to seek God, and I feel how great of impact it made to this day. And so if for someone here that maybe be listening and maybe even struggling of how to make decisions, because there's so many options, and sometimes when we make decisions like what college you want to go to, what job you want to take, there's so many decisions. So how would you say to someone to help navigate them to making a wise destiny decision?
We just can't make decisions based off our emotions.
That is so true. Yep.
I feel like our generation, it's like, whatever I feel, I'm going to do it. Like, I validate my emotions. I validate my feelings.
Gosh,
like, don't you always hear that?
Yes.
It's like, okay, yeah, that's fine for the world, but in the kingdom, we don't move on our emotions.
Exactly.
You could probably think of times where, like, I know I can, times where if you would have like made a decision based on your emotions, like,
oh my
God, where would we be?
Yes.
Because it is hard. But I think for me, that would be my first advice, is like, really get a handle on your emotions, and don't always just, move on what you feel. That could be such a dangerous thing. And I think the other thing I would say is like, listen to the voices, right? The right voices.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. I know for me, that's been super pivotal. Is like so many times we're in a decision-making moment and we want to go to our friends. And it's also so tempting to want to go to somebody who you know is going to give you the answer you want.
Oh my gosh, yep.
You're like, I'm going to go to them because they're going to be with me in my pity party. Oh yeah, like let's have a pity party. Yes. Let's eat ice cream and just cry together. Yeah. Like it's easy to do that, but the real question is, who are you going to? What are the voices you're listening to, and do they have your destiny in mind as you're making that decision?
Right. Yeah, that's so good.
And but yeah, make sure you talk to somebody who has your destiny in mind. And Britt, I know for you, I'm sure voices in your life have been super pivotal in making those destiny decisions.
Yeah, they have. And I think that was one thing that I had to, because keep in mind, you grew up in like a pastor kid's house. So a lot of decisions, and I feel like a lot of people maybe spoken over your life. I didn't have that. I just had like, serve God, but it was never talking about pursue the call of God. It was more just, serve God and stay, sold out for God. So I think for me, I had to really go after what I felt God was calling me to. And I think that's where I made the decision to get close to leadership. And that was hard for me. I remember my first gang girl leader was Crystal and Slo Rosano from North Hollywood. And I love her. She's one of my closest friends now. But I remember making the decision. These are small decisions, but look at the impact they made. And I remember she was like, come spend the night at Sister Doreen's house. This was back in like 08, 09, okay? And I remember she was like, we're going to discipleship. Do you have a skirt? I was like, no, I don't have a skirt. Okay, giving her altitude for what reason? I don't know. And she's like, you can borrow mine. I was so mad wearing that skirt. I don't want to wear your skirt. Yeah, I don't want to wear your pencil skirt, And so I remember it was so bad. We went to the discipleship. I went home. I threw that skirt away. I was like, hopefully she don't ask for it back. But it was those small decisions that I didn't understand yet. But I had someone speaking into my life. And then I remember just saying yes to God. I got really close to Jolina Galanesi. I got close to Eva, so different people in my life. I think one big decision I had to make, I had to let go. And it was so hard for me because, I'm getting choked up. That's cool. Okay, so if you guys know a lot about me, I'm really close to my family, super close. And I had to, maybe this is for somebody. Maybe you have a family and you're serving God, but your family isn't. And nothing is wrong with that. Like, you have to be that light for them. But I remember it was so hard for me because I have like 30 cousins, okay? And a good group of them are my age. And I remember I had to make a destiny decision where I was like, I can't hang out on the weekends with you guys. I maybe have to make some things that aren't going to be understood. And I had to say, hey, if you love me, you're going to support me going and serving God, because they didn't understand that. They thought, Brittany, I was always like down for my family, whatever they said at any time. And it came down to, I really had to make decisions that will glorify God. And that came to like telling my family, I love you so much that I have to go to this prayer meeting. I love you so much that I have to attend this. And it was hard for them to understand. But now my biggest supporters are my family. The ones that are like, yes, like I have a niece out in Amsterdam. And who supported her getting there? Our family. Like giving of the finances, giving because they see the fruit of saying yes. And that was the destiny decision. It may sound small, but it was something I had to recognize. If I don't bring clear to them, like, I love you so much. I mean, God is calling me, and if I don't answer that call, I'm going to really just be suppressing, ultimately, my destiny. And so maybe that's for somebody, maybe, friends. Yeah. I've heard so many gang girls, like, if you don't know what a gang girl is, it's a young student or adult that represent themselves with this generation, this now generation, and they want to serve God, but the hardest thing is separating from friends. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
They're like, but my friend, like, they need God too. I'm the only, like, they use those lines against us sometimes. Yeah. I'm the only Jesus they'll see. Yes, that's so true. But you have to remember there's a time for that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I think just your testimony, like, I think of the quote that says the first one through the wall is the bloodiest. And it's like, it's true.
That's so true.
When you make those decisions, they alter and they unlock not only the destiny in your life, but the destiny in others' lives.
So true.
And I think about even, our niece, she's my sister-in-law. So,
yeah.
But our niece, you know, she's there in Amsterdam, but would that ever have happened, you know, if you didn't make the decisions to unlock destinies for your family? And so it's beautiful. And I think that it's difficult. And what did you do, going back to just the voices, like, what did you do? Because I know it wasn't always easy, you know, when you sought advice. How did you know you were listening to the right voice? Because sometimes we're so in between. We're like, is this God? Is this God? Or where is he leading me? How did you discern that?
Yeah, I can say I haven't made all the right choices. And I think that's what helped me so much, is because there's such a peace of God in making the right choices. And I think that's something that I always put back on any decision I make. And something I learned very early on was to, if you're making a decision, sleep on it. Pray on it. Do not make a decision just, you know, at the whim of the air, because again, we're emotional, especially being women. And so I think that was something I always felt, the peace of God. And I always prayed for clarity and peace. With every decision I've made, I pray, Lord, give me clarity, give me peace, let me feel your peace. And I think that's something that I always had to do. And then I always referenced back to my leaders. Hey, this is how I'm feeling. This is the advice I'm getting. What do you suggest I do? I think that's so key, Z. Like, so many times we want to tell our leader, hey, I made this decision, I'm doing this. But do you understand the key and the role of a leader? They're especially your pastor and your pastor's wife, they're ultimately responsible of leading their sheep in their church. And so by us just bypassing, going to them for guidance, we're ultimately just bypassing what God wants to speak through them to us. And that's why I think maybe we could talk on that, Z, before we come to an end a little bit, is talk about getting close to leadership. How does that look? How do you do it? Because I know you have, your mom is an amazing pastor's wife and you lived with her, but you also got close to other leaders. How did you do it? Why did you do it? And what was the benefits of that?
Yeah, I think there's power in proximity, and it's important that we know that we need to be close to the influences that we aspire to be like and to imitate. True. The Bible talks about imitate your leaders, right? And I think that it's so important that we get as close to them as we can. And so many times you'll realize sometimes it's intimidating. I know for me, I have some disciples I just talked to yesterday morning that they're like, I'm nervous. I get nervous. I get scared. And I'm like, yes, but once you break past that and you allow access, and you know, they want it. They want you close. And once you get close to them, you start to see and you start to imitate. And it's not always what they say, but it's what they do. That's and I've learned, because I've lived in a pastor's house growing up, you know, and I realized the shift. There was a shift from, you know, being that daughter to being that disciple. And I think that I had to shift my posture. And there were times, I'm going to give a testimony, because my mom could testify to this. Like, I was missensitive. Like, literally any like rebuke, like I would start crying, because I'm just like, I'm the type that's like, I disappointed them, like no, you know, but any rebuke, any confrontation, anything like that, I would just have a breakdown. And I was like, oh gosh, but then I had to shift my posture, where it's not that, you know, they're upset or hurt with me or anything like that. It's a matter of, hey, I'm in a posture of a disciple, and they're calling things out, challenging things inside of me. And they're not just speaking into a daughter, they're speaking into a disciple, into the potential within us. And I know we could both, you know, testify to our callings being awakened because of powerful leaders in our life that have unlocked things within us that we didn't even realize. And so I would say my tips to you would be, get close. Break past the intimidation, break past the fear. Don't let the enemy lie to you. Get as close as you can. And my second thing would be imitate. Whatever they do, if you see them there early on a Sunday morning, be there. If you see them going to that meeting, show up. If you see them, you know, in any realm, get close and imitate them. And I've learned more by what I've seen than what she's spoken to me. And even with my other influences and leaders in my life, I have another leader in my life that she would have prayer in the morning at her house, and I wasn't invited. I don't think it was personal. She just didn't invite me. I was young. And I remember telling my dad, I'm like, I didn't get invited to her prayer meetings. Like, I want God. I want the call of God. And he'd be like, just show up. Like, just show up to her house. You know when it is. You know where it's at. Show up. And I just would show up.
That's fun.
I just walked in on the prayer meeting. And from then on, I just got close to her. And I was like, I don't care if you want me to learn from you, but I'm going to learn from you. Like, I'm going to be there and I'm going to learn from you because you have something I need and that I want. And so it does take that hunger and it takes that desire that not everyone has. That's and so I think honestly that's what separates the influencers to the leaders. Yeah. Because there's that fight, there's that hunger, there's that determination to get what you know God desires you.
Because our backgrounds are different. I think mine was different. I went from a disciple to a daughter. Well, daughter in the house, it's so different, but an actual physical daughter-in-law, you know. And so that was different for me. So I went from getting those like just falling in love with my pastor's and pastor wife's heart, and then getting those rebukes where I was like, she doesn't know how I am. I'm emotional, you know? And because I was sensitive, and I remember she drove me home. I don't know why. She drove me home one morning, sat in my driveway. It was Sister Doreen, you guys. And she looked at me and she goes, you need to get some alligator skin, girl. And I was like, alligator skin? What does that even mean? She goes, you need to let those things roll off your back. Like, I was trying to think, like, what does that mean, you know?
The heart of a dove. The classic phrase. They get it from my grandpa. Heart of a dove, skin like an alligator.
There you go. Yep.
We've all learned.
She's like, your heart's pretty soft. You know, you got to, you know, be alligator-like skin. And I remember I was like, okay, so I got to show up like, you know, kind of hood. You know, but it wasn't even like that. It was like, don't take everything so personal. Yeah. And so that was like my beginning of discipleship. And then years later, then I started dating my husband, Ryan. And then it became, and that was a hard shift for me. Because I remember, I don't know, we were driving somewhere, and then she was like, you're my daughter. And then I was like, I know, I'm like a daughter of the house. But then I felt like the Holy Spirit like just quickened me. She's like, no, she's talking to like a daughter. And I remember I had to shift that because I kept seeing her like, I'm going to serve like a pastor's wife. Like, I got your back. But I needed to shift. I needed to be a daughter. And then ever since then, now I know how to navigate, because that's kind of tricky. Like, you know, I had to navigate between when she wanted to speak into my life as a disciple and then also as a daughter. And something that I really learned too by being close in proximity is the power of just speaking life. That's something that I try to imitate with her, because even before like we got together on this podcast, she's like, you guys got it. You know, you're so beautiful. And then she was like, you guys have such great chemistry. And I'm like, yeah, we do. Like, you know, I just started believing
she made us believe it. We're like, yes, right? We got this.
And that's one thing, like many things, but one of the many things that I can say that I learned. She's never told me to talk someone up. She just did it. And I learned from examples. And that all became possible because of those destiny decisions of being close. Even when it hurt, like, man, maybe you feel like maybe your pastor doesn't know you. Share your heart. I know there's been many times where we sat in pastor's wives' settings, leadership settings, where they're like, I didn't know my disciple from the church was hurting in this way because they didn't share it. But the moment you share what you're expecting, like, you can't just say, you know, disciple me, but you have to go in like, I need to learn how to read my word. Or I need to learn how to be that power praying wife. Like, you have to go in so they know how to navigate, encourage, challenge, and follow up with you. And so those are all small decisions that ultimately affect a big destiny, right?
Yes, I think too, like, one of the last things I want to mention when it comes to decisions and making destiny decisions is don't isolate yourself.
So true.
And I think that whether you're in the house of God or whether, you know, you're coming in as a new believer or you're even a leader, sometimes as leaders we get so, you know, so nervous or embarrassed even to be honest about decisions we're making in our life or things happening inside of us. We have to really break that, because it's so important that we don't isolate ourselves and make decisions on our own, because sometimes we can't be trusted. Right. We can't trust ourselves. We have to lean on God. Yes, it's us and God, but it's also the key voices in our life that undergird us and confirm. The Bible talks about there's safety in a multitude of counselors, safe counselors, that you say, hey, I'm considering your destiny, I'm considering your future, and even though this decision might hurt right now, it might hurt your flesh, it might hurt you, I want you to know that you're making this decision to access the full destiny God has for you. And so don't isolate yourself. And if that's you and you're like battling with that decision inside of you, and maybe you're even embarrassed to share with the leader or share with your pastor's wife, I want to encourage you, take that step of faith and share, because there's safety in that. And they're going to be able to come around you and speak life and help direct you, not based off your emotions, not based off your situation, but based off your future. So I would say, don't isolate yourself.
That's so good.
And stay close. Stay close.
Definitely. And remember this, even if you feel it's a small decision, it ultimately affects your destiny. So we pray that every decision that comes amongst you and that you have to approach, that you do it with clarity. You do it looking and seeking after God, saying God in prayer and God's word, and then you also seek after God's leadership He placed in your life. And so we pray this encourages someone, that you make destiny decisions and that it glorifies God. We love you, and we'll talk to you very soon.